Joining us now, live from his office in the West Wing, Vice President Mike Pence. Mr. Vice President, welcome back to Fox News Sunday.
Good morning, Chris.
I want to start with those growing protests across the country against the stay-at-home order. As some of the protesters ignoring social distancing, what do you think specifically of their protests and how they're carrying them out?
Well, first, let me say from the moment President Trump asked me to lead the White House Coronavirus Task Force 2 months ago, he made it clear that we had one objective, and that was to save lives. And in the intervening 2 months, the American people have stepped forward, have embraced the social distancing, have done the mitigation efforts. And as we sit here this morning, we continue to see encouraging results, declining cases, declining hospitalizations. Because of what the American people have done, because of the president's leadership and what governors have done around the country, we are slowing the spread. We're hastening the day when we can put the coronavirus in the past and reopen the American economy. Beyond the focus on lives, the president also made it clear that we wanted to ensure that our hospital workers, incredible men and women, had the resources and equipment that they needed. We've spent hundreds of millions of medical supplies to the critical areas around the country. And I must tell you, the fact that no American who has needed a ventilator has been denied a ventilator is a great testament to our national response at every level. And on the subject of testing, we're continuing to scale and expand testing, and we'll do that because as the president laid out those guidelines this week, no one wants to reopen America more than President Donald Trump. And what you see, I think, among millions of Americans who've been embracing those social distancing measures and making the sacrifices is they want their governors to find a way to responsibly and safely reopen their state economies. And what the president laid out last week is a framework, a phased framework to reopen America, to do that. And we're going to work very closely with governors to implement that as soon as we can responsibly do it around the country.
But Mr. Vice President, in a number of these cases, these protesters who are not social distancing are saying they don't want to wait. In many cases, they're protesting your own guidelines to stop the spread. On Friday, the president tweeted this, and I want to put it up: liberate Minnesota, liberate Michigan, and liberate Virginia and save your great Second Amendment. It is under siege. Washington Governor Inslee responded, the president is fomenting domestic rebellion and spreading lies, even while his own administration says the virus is real and deadly. So what does the president mean? Because you've got guidelines that are calling for social distancing and staying at home. Even your new guidelines to reopen the country are very phased and gradual. What does the president mean when he says liberate these states?
The American people know that no one in America wants to reopen this country more than President Donald Trump. And on Thursday, the president directed us to lay out guidelines for when and how states could responsibly do that. And in the president's tweets and public statements, I can assure you he's going to continue to encourage governors to find ways to safely and responsibly let America go back to work. And the guidelines for opening up America again give a roadmap for doing just that, Chris. For states that have 14 days of consecutive declining cases, that have a proper hospitalization capacity, we recommend that they can begin under phase 1 to ease the social distancing measures that have been put into effect, allow some people to begin to come back to work, allow some activities in the community to begin to happen. And when the president speaks about reopening America, it's all about encouraging governors, as soon as they determine is most proper and most appropriate, to be able to do that and do that quickly. America works when America is working, and the president wants to see us put the coronavirus in the past by these strong measures the American people have embraced. But we want to get America working again just as soon as we can.
Understood, Mr. Vice President. I want to talk to you about your plan to reopen the country because there are a number of health experts that say that we need triple the number of tests that are now being conducted and much more contact tracing in order to safely reopen the government. Can you tell us how soon that you're going to have 500,000 tests a day, which is what they're calling for? We're doing about 150,000 now. How soon are we going to have 500,000 tests a day, or don't you think that's necessary?
Well, under the guidelines for opening up America again, we create in phase one a specific criteria for testing that we believe is appropriate to be able to test people that have symptoms for coronavirus and be able to monitor people that are particularly vulnerable to serious outcomes, nursing homes and particular populations in our cities that have shown some vulnerability. We believe the testing that we have today, Chris, across the country, once we activate all of the labs that can do coronavirus testing, is sufficient for any state in America to move into phase one. We're doing about 150,000 tests a day. And you remember a month ago, we had done 80,000 tests total. Now we've cleared 4 million overall. But at 150,000 tests a day, we think we can double that number by working with governors to activate all of the laboratories in their states around the country that can do coronavirus testing. That would put us at roughly 300,000. But what we're going to make clear to governors again tomorrow in our weekly conference call, and I want to make clear to the American people, is at President Trump's direction, we're going to continue to fully partner with governors around the country and health officials in increasing and scaling the amount of testing. And we have every confidence that we can have a sufficient amount of testing to be able to reopen America, not just in phase one, but continue in the weeks and months ahead to expand testing in ways that will give the American people the confidence and the tools to be able to go back to work.
Mr. Vice President, I got limited time with you, so I'm going to try to squeeze a few more questions in. The $350 billion program to provide loans to small businesses has run out, and you still don't have a deal on replenishing that with another $250 billion. How close are you to a deal with the Democrats?
The Paycheck Protection Program that the President signed into law has been an incredible success. And literally has made it possible for small businesses around America to keep people on the payroll over a 2-month period of time while we weather the storm of the coronavirus. But as the President and I were literally on a phone call with Republicans and Democrats last week, we learned that the fund had run out, and we are urging Democrats in the House and the Senate to step forward and approve an expansion of the Paycheck Protection Bill. We're close, Chris.
So briefly, how close are you to it, sir?
The negotiations are going on. We're very close, but I think every American has seen the success of the President's program to provide payroll support, and we're going to work to expand that so that no one working in a small business in America would have to worry about missing a paycheck during the trial and difficulty of the coronavirus epidemic.
Several sources now say that the coronavirus originated in a lab in Wuhan and that the Chinese government covered it up for some period of time, which allowed the virus to spread. Now, Speaker Pelosi says while the president imposed his travel ban in January, he minimized the threat from the virus. Here she is, sir.
Instead of calling it a hoax, instead of calling it minimizing it and say it was magically disappeared, we lost time. The delay and the denial caused deaths, and that's just the way it is.
Mr. Vice President, I'm getting this question a lot, and again, I've got to ask you for a brief answer. What specifically is this administration going to do to hold China accountable?
Well, I appreciate you referencing the fact that that by the end of January of this year, President Trump took the unprecedented step of suspending all travel from China. No American president had ever done that. And there's no question, all of our health experts agree that that bought us an invaluable amount of time. It's enabled us to save lives and make sure healthcare workers have the resources that they need to meet this moment. But it is clear to us that not only was there a failure by the World Health Organization to communicate to America and the world what was happening in China, but also that China was not as forthcoming as they should have been with America or the world about what was happening.
So are we going to do something,
the President's made it clear. Well, the President's made it clear he's not happy. We're going to make proper inquiries into this at the proper time. But I have to tell you, the one mission that this president has given the White House Coronavirus Task Force is to save lives, to put this coronavirus in the past. We're going to stay focused on that mission. It's one mission and one team. We're going to work with governors across the country in both political parties. And I just want the American people to be encouraged by the fact that we are making progress. We really do see downward trends in cases and in hospitalizations. And we really believe that because of what the American people have done, because of our incredible healthcare workers, that we are together as a nation hastening the day when we will put the coronavirus in the past and get America working again.
Vice President Pence, thank you. Thanks for your time during a very busy period. Please come back, sir.
Thank you, Chris.